Inks Lake State Park is located about an hour and a half northwest of Austin, just outside of Lano. It's a stone's throw away from Longhorn Caverns, another park I stopped at along the way. The main tour of the cave is lame, but I highly recommend the 3-hour Wild Cave tour if you're into that, and perched on an inlet of Buchanan Lake along the Colorado River. Despite being one of the busiest state parks in Texas, including when I went in mid-May, Inks Lake held the largest abundance of wildlife I had seen at any park, and it didn't take too long to show itself. Sometimes in Texas, you just want a shower, and then this thing falls into your shower stall. This caution flag colored slinky is a Texas red-headed centipede, and the largest centipede in North America. They have 21 or 23 pairs of legs in a few different color patterns depending on the region they're found in, but they always bear the bright red head. The Texas version has its own name, but they are also called the giant desert centipede or Sonoran centipede in the southwest and northern Mexico, and can be found as far east as Missouri and western Louisiana. They're about as mean as they look, with venomous fangs and pinchers that tear openings into the skin that allow its venom to sink in, and they're not afraid to pick fights either. They eat insects, amphibians, and even small snakes and rodents, and are usually nocturnal. This one fell out of the ceiling as I was about to get into the shower about 15 minutes after I got to the park and scared the hell out of me, and needless to say, I decided to wait a bit. This intimidating-looking plant is Texas bull nettle, and it's intimidating for a reason. Nicknamed tread softly or malamure, it's easily identified by the spotted leaves and the white flower on top of it in the spring, but it's also unfortunately easy to miss while walking through thick brush. The little white spots you see on the leaves aren't spots, they're needles, hundreds of them coating the leaves and the stem waiting for an unsuspecting pair of legs to walk by. Even lightly brushing against this plant is enough to cause searing burning for hours on end. The needles themselves are extremely brittle and designed to break off when they brush against something, and dozens of them will lodge themselves into the skin and inject a steady flow of toxins the same way a bee leaves its stinger in the skin. The sting is painful enough to land at a spot on Encyclopedia Britannica's 7 most dangerous plants to touch list, because of the pain and because of truly how long the sting can last. Unlike other types of stinging nettle, rashes from bull nettle will not go away on their own and must be treated, and in some cases an allergic reaction to it can be deadly. I've witnessed the effects of a bull nettle rash firsthand before, And this one little plant is without a doubt more than capable of ruining an entire day and possibly your entire trip, and is one of the biggest reasons I always wear jeans when walking through brushy areas like this, no matter how hot it is. The immediate treatments for a bull nettle brush, duct tape, urine, baking soda, and Windex, all sound incredibly bizarre, but they all have to do with neutralizing the reaction to the toxin. Firstly, just like a bee stinger, you have to get the needles out of you before you can treat the rash. The best way to do this is laying any kind of adhesive tape over the rash to get the needles to stick to it, but unfortunately, it's recommended to wait an excruciating 10 minutes after contact with the plant before removing the needles, because pressing on the needles with the tape too early will only push more toxin into the skin, and the needles take time to dry after being detached from the plant, but you can and should pour water over the rash while you wait. Bull nettle needles are incredibly acidic, which is where most of the pain comes from, and it's the reason for the next part of the treatment. If you have nothing else to work with, then just like jellyfish stings, urine can actually do a lot to calm the rash and minimize the reaction. Basic pH products like baking soda also work in the same way, including a few creative ones that people swear by like Windex. If you're lucky in the wild, two plants that often grow very close to bull nettle are jewelweed and curled dock, and breaking open and rubbing the leaves of either of these over the rash will provide a natural antidote. However you go about it, tread softly is not to be messed with, and should be admired from a very, very far distance. Our second critter and the first lizard on the list is this guy, the ornate tree lizard. There were actually quite a few of these guys lurking along the creek as I headed upriver, hanging out by the water's edge. Ornate tree lizards have an extremely wide habitat variation stretching across the southwest, and a range of different colors to go with it. For example, these guys in southern Arizona are also ornate tree lizards, but are usually much darker than the orange ones here in hill country. On top of that, what you don't see underneath some of these guys is an incredibly bright blue chest and throat on some of the males, or an orange chest and throat on some of the other males. The coloration difference also marks a difference in behavior, as the blue-orange lizards are much more aggressive and territorial, while the orange-throated ones are much tamer and aren't afraid to be more nomadic during the seasons where resources dry up. Interestingly, the lush hills around Inks Lake are about as far east as the entire ornate tree lizard species ventures, but they sure seem happy here to me. The next feature I came across was a much larger distinct cousin of the ornate tree lizard. It was also fairly shy, but I managed to get 2 good shots of him. This big girl, I think, is a blue spiny lizard. The black and white band around its neck is their signature mark, and its large size, almost a foot in length, also checks out. The reason I was originally unsure is that typically, blue spiny lizards only live in a very small range in Texas, along the border from Del Rio to Brownsville. However, databases like iNaturalist are now showing a healthy population just northwest of Austin, right where Inks Lake State Park sits. It's unknown yet whether the blue spiny lizards here are a naturally occurring population or unintentionally introduced somehow, but this one here seemed to be doing well, and it will be interesting to see how the population evolves here in the near future. These guys live in rocky areas that provide shelter and crevices to hide in, spend their days basking in the sun, often in groups of up to a dozen, and eat a variety of insects along with wasps, which automatically makes them cool. Unlike most reptiles, they actually give live birth. Females are brown and tan colored like this one here, but the males shine a slightly metallic blue in the sunlight, which is where the name comes from. These guys I've seen before, but never gotten this close to so many nests at once. They're called barn swallows, and they're found pretty widely across Texas and North America. Their nests are made of mud and lined with livestock hair, other bird feathers, or pretty much anything else they can find, and are almost always built onto man-made structures. Bridges, like the rural Park Road 4 bridge over this creek, are a favorite nesting spot for them, but they will also build in quieter abandoned buildings and, of course, barns. Interestingly, there were no nests on the interior beams of the bridge, only the sides facing outwards. Their mating season lasts from March to July, and since so many of them were flying around patrolling the nests when I recorded this in May, it probably means there's eggs inside of them. The swallows here were easily startled whenever I approached or stood under the nests, but if I waited under the bridge for a few minutes out of sight, they seemed to calm down and return to the nests. They eat mostly flying insects and will mate and build a new nest each season, leaving the old one for any other creatures that come along, and generally keep to themselves around their bridge. Our last little friend of the day was lying quite boldly up on a perch underneath a nest of vultures, and seemed pretty unconcerned about me or the buzzards above him. Unlike the first two lizards on this list, Texas spiny lizards, like this guy here, can be found abundantly all over Texas. They can thrive well in both urban landscapes and wilderness, and spend most of their days perched in trees and sunning themselves wherever they can. They eat mostly insects and are territorial during mating season, but unlike the ornate tree lizards, males won't fight each other directly. If you ever see two spiny lizards having what looks like a push-up contest, that's a territory dispute. The black diamond pattern on their back makes them pretty easily identifiable, and the adult ones are also pretty large and hard to miss, but they're also incredibly good at blending into the spotted rocks or tree bark out here when they need to. Even as someone who usually avoids busier parks, I highly recommend Inks Lake, especially to anyone who lives nearby in Austin. Llano is also a pretty cool town too, and on your way out there, stop at Storm's Drive-In in Burnett. Not sponsored, just a damn cool old place to eat.